Hi, I'm Old Norse specialist Dr. Jackson Crawford. I want to talk in this video a little bit about the Scandinavian toast word, skål or scowl, and whether and what its roots might be in the Viking world. Now, to get started with what is the word, you will typically hear people enthusiastic about Scandinavian things in the USA say skål, often spelling it S-K-A-L, which is sort of correct, S-K-O-A-L, which is sort of historically correct, or S-K long A-L. Occasionally you'll hear people say skál, which is the Icelandic spelling and Icelandic pronunciation. But these are all kind of correct. So S-K-A with the halo above it, pronounced skål, that is the Danish, Norwegian, or Swedish form. S-K-A with the acute accent above it, pronounced scowl in Icelandic, or skål in Faroese, that is the Icelandic or Faroese form. So they're all historically and linguistically valid. In Old Norse, the word is spelled in the Icelandic way, but probably in terms of pronunciation closest to Danish in this case. Danish has the most conservative vowel system in a lot of ways, at least in stressed syllables. Now, that may sound ridiculous, counterintuitive. You've probably heard that Icelandic is the language that's closest to Old Norse, and in structural terms that's true, but just like none of your siblings is the one closest to your parents, you know, one has mom's nose, one has dad's ears, whatever, descendant languages are never going to be identical to their ancestor, and sometimes even a language that's really conservative in one respect is not conservative in other respects, and Icelandic vowels are not typically very conservative. So that's the word. Is the word used in Old Norse? Yes, but never in the context of people toasting each other and saying skål or scowl. The word just means bowl, so it is something that toasts are drunk out of, at least, and that's probably where it comes from, right? You're saying, as you lift your bowl, you're saying like bowl, right? You know, like you're just toasting. I guess it's like holding up a glass and saying glasses or something like that. It's not a, you know, it's a reasonable origin point for a toast word. We see it, for example, in Skál, one of the parts of Snorri Sturluson's Prose Edda, where we read, for example, I'm going to use Old Norse pronunciation here, not modern Icelandic, although I'm vacillating about that a lot lately because I've been in Iceland speaking a lot of Icelandic. Voru þó teknar þær skólir Thor var vanur að drekka af og snerti hrungnir úr hveri. So then the bowls were taken that Thor was used to drinking from, and then Hrungnir, this is an enemy of the gods, he drinks them all down. So the drinking out of bowls, of course, we also know that they use drinking horns. Who that has ever been to a Renaissance fest or Madery does not associate drinking horns with Vikings, but in fact, typically it's these bowls that are talked about in the context, at least, of people routinely drinking and toasting one another in Norse sagas and other literary sources. Now, that word skål is related to skull. These come from a common word for something hollow. So in fact, Old Norse skalli, which means a bald head or a skull, that is borrowed into English as the word skull. No word in English that has the sk sound is actually a native English word. They're all borrowed from typically Old Norse or from Greek. You know, schism is from Greek. Skull, skill, scale, which is actually also from the same root. Those are Norse words in English. I believe that it's because of enthusiastic 18th and 19th century translators misunderstanding that this word shared an origin with skull, right, being hollow things and having the same Indo-European or Germanic root, that this encouraged them to translate it as skull, and that this is part of why there's a persistent myth that the Vikings drank from skulls, even though that's never described in any Norse literary sources. That also comes from misunderstanding some kennings in Old Norse poems. All right, so I haven't talked a little bit about the word. I'm going to give you a quick word from my friends and partners at Grimfrost, and then come back and discuss a little bit about what's actually said about toasting in Old Norse sagas. So again, we don't actually see a scene where someone raises a bowl or a horn or something and says Skål in Old Norse. I don't think that it's impossible that this practice dates back to the Old Norse period, but we just don't have them directly doing that. Instead, we have many scenes where people do drink toasts, toast being called a full. Literally, I mean, this is a thing that's full, right? Or a mini, literally a memory, and usually the full word. So one of the most comprehensive scenes that discusses toast making that would probably interest people today is a scene in Håkonar saga Goða, the saga of Håkon the Good, part of Snorri Sturluson's Heimskringla, History of the Kings of Norway. Now, in the saga, Håkon the Good, who's been raised in England, is a Christian ruling Norway in the middle of the 900s when Norway is still pagan. So his subjects are still largely pagan, including the powerful Håkon Jarl. Yes, they have the same name. And Håkon Jarl is the local ruler in Trøndelag, modern Norwegian Trøndelag, the part of Norway around Trondheim. Now, Håkon Jarl, Trøndelag invites all the farmers in this area to a bloat sacrifice where all kinds of livestock are sacrificed, and especially horses are named. And then the blood from, at least the horses, probably the other animals too, is said to be sprinkled around on the temple that they're performing this in, as well as all the apparatus, as well as all the people who are there. Whether these really reflect true pre-Christian practices is hard to know, because this sort of resembles what a medieval Catholic might assume pagans did, right? Taking holy water and spreading it around with an aspergillium, but turning that into blood, right? Like kind of making it like a metal version of a Catholic Mass. But these could be true old customs. Again, we just have to kind of always be aware that they're being transmitted through Christian eyes, and assumptions and distortions might be made. Now, there are fires set up in the middle of the halls, and the toast, the full, are carried over the fires, maybe handed over the fires. The word is bera which looks like carried over, carried through, carried around. Then we have this interesting part, again in reconstructed Old Norse pronunciation. En så gerði veitsluna og höfðingi var, þó skyldi hann signa fullits og allan blótmatinn. Skyldi fyrst Óðinshull, skyldi það drekka til sigurs og ríkis konungi sínum. En síðan njarðarfull og frösfull til års og friðar, þó var morgunmornum títt að drekka þar næst bragafull. Menn drukku og full frænda sinna þeirra hugðir höfðu verið og voru það minni kolluð. So the one who made the feast, threw the feast, and was a chieftain, he was supposed to bless the toast and all of the sacrificial food. And he should first make a toast to Odin. He should drink that to victory and to the rule of the king. And then later the toast of Njordur and the toast of Freyr for harvest and peace. And then many men were accustomed to drink next the Bragi's toast. Men drank also the toast of their relatives who had been put into burial mounds, and that was called minni, literally memory. There's also a very interesting scene in this saga where the Christian king Håkon goes to a feast in the autumn with Håkon Jarl, and the very first toast Håkon Jarl takes, og signaði óðni og drakk af horninu til konungs. So he blessed it, to Odin and drink it for the king. Now, when the king takes his up, he signs it with a cross because he's Christian, and the pagans at the feast get upset about this. But Håkon Jarl defends the king and says, lying, Konungur gerir svo sem þeir allir trúa og mátt sinn og megin og signa full sitt Thor. Hann gerði hamarsmark yfir áður hann drakk. King did like everybody who believes on his own strength and might, and he blessed the toast for Thor. He made the sign of the hammer over it before he drank, which of course is a lie. We also see lots of other scenes where people do more kind of everyday drinking of toast. For example, in Egil Saga, we read about a brot faramini, toast for departure, so toasting someone before he leaves on a journey, hoping for a good trip. But again, we don't get the specific words, right? Whatever the specific words or signs that Håkon Jarl is supposed to be doing to, bless a toast to Odin or make a toast to Odin or Njordr Freyr or Bragi, these aren't recorded, just the fact that people do them. And that's very, very commonly true of our Norse literary sources about pre-Christian religion. We hear that something happened, not how. Well, for now, thank you for your time. Thank you to my supporters on Patreon and Ko-Fi and everybody taking the Old Norse courses and reading my books. Really appreciate your support. And from beautiful Colorado, wishing you all the best.